July 20th, 1969. A man in a bulky white suit climbs carefully down a ladder. His boot hovers for a moment, then presses into dust no human had ever touched before.
There you go. Okay, now I think I'll do the same.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. 500 million people watched live as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin made history. For many, it was humanity's proudest moment. We had broken free from Earth and claimed another world. But almost immediately, doubts began to surface. Was it truly real? Or had the most extraordinary achievement in history been nothing more than a staged illusion? That question refuses to die. 50 years later, books, films, and online forums still debate whether Apollo 11 was the greatest triumph of science and courage or the greatest lie of the 20th century. And here's the real stake. If the landings were real, humanity proved it could achieve the impossible, a leap that redefined what we believed about ourselves. But if they were fake, then our greatest dream was stolen, replaced with the most elaborate illusion ever sold to the world. It's a mystery that still fascinates, frustrates, and divides. Because whether you believe in the hoax or the heroism, the moon landing is too big a story to ignore. And the first seeds of doubt weren't in the photos at all. They began in the pressure cooker of politics.
We choose to go to the moon.
A space race where failure wasn't an option, and the moon became the ultimate battlefield. The Cold War set the stage. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy made a bold promise. America would land a man on the moon before the decade ended.
35 years ago, fly the Atlantic. Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon.
The problem? At that moment, the United States had barely managed a 15-minute suborbital flight. The Soviets were ahead at every milestone. First satellite, first man in orbit, first spacewalk. The moon became more than science. It was about power, ideology, and survival in the eyes of the world. Failure wasn't an option. Billions of dollars poured into NASA, and at its peak, Apollo consumed nearly 4% of the federal budget. More than 400,000 engineers, scientists, and contractors worked around the clock, building rockets, computers, suits, and tracking systems that had never existed before. To most Americans, this was a daring gamble. But to skeptics, it was motive. With so much at stake, billions of dollars, Kennedy's legacy, national pride, what if NASA realized the deadline couldn't be met? Would they risk humiliation or quietly stage a success? In 1974, Bill Kaysing, a former contractor, published "We Never Went to the Moon." He stitched together rumors, misread images, and public mistrust, accusing NASA of fraud.
Is that during the 60s, they said, if you can't make it, fake it.
His timing was perfect. America was scarred by Vietnam, shaken by Watergate, and suspicious of official stories. If leaders lied about war, why not about space? And then came the photographs. Images that were supposed to inspire also raised odd questions. A flag that seemed to ripple, a sky with no stars, shadows that didn't quite line up. To most, they were quirks. To doubters, they were cracks. Cracks suggesting Apollo wasn't our greatest triumph, but our boldest illusion. And once those cracks appeared, the world began to dig deeper. What they claimed to find would become the cornerstone of one of history's most enduring conspiracy theories. For those who believe the moon landing was staged, the proof is right there in the footage and photos. Over the years, a few strange details have become the backbone of the hoax theory. The waving flag. When Buzz Aldrin planted the flag, millions watching thought they saw it ripple. But how could it move when there's no wind on the moon? NASA's answer was simple. The flag had a rod along the top to keep it stretched out. And when the astronauts twisted the pole, the fabric shook. With no air to slow it down, the motion lasted longer than it would on Earth. To engineers, it was expected. To doubters, it looked like a flag blowing on a film set. The starless sky. In every Apollo photo, the sky above is black and empty, not a single star. To skeptics, it looked like NASA forgot to add them to the backdrop. In reality, The cameras were set for the blinding brightness of the lunar surface. Stars, faint by comparison, simply couldn't appear. The same thing happens in daylight photos on Earth. Still, for conspiracy believers, the missing stars weren't an accident. They were a cover-up. The strange shadows. Some Apollo photos showed shadows pointing in different directions, as if multiple spotlights had been used. To skeptics, this was the smoking gun of a studio set. NASA explained that the moon's surface isn't flat. Hills, slopes, and rocks bend shadows, and sunlight reflecting off the dusty ground makes the geometry look odd. But once the idea of studio lights took hold, no amount of explanation could erase the suspicion. The deadly radiation. Perhaps the boldest claim was the Van Allen radiation belts, zones of high-energy particles surrounding Earth. Believers argued no astronaut could pass through them alive. Apollo's path skimmed the edge, and the crew crossed in under an hour. NASA insisted the exposure was small, the risk acceptable. To scientists, the numbers closed the case. To doubters, it was the final proof that Apollo never happened. Hollywood's influence. And then Hollywood stepped in. In 1978, a thriller called Capricorn 1. Imagine NASA faking a mission to Mars on a movie set, complete with actors, cameras, and a massive cover-up. For many, it looked exactly like what moon hoax believers had been claiming for years. Later, the rise of the internet amplified the effect. Photos were zoomed, cropped, and dissected online. Shadows became proof. Lens flares became confessions. Theories spread faster than any rebuttal ever could. Each of these claims had an explanation. But stacked together, they created a narrative that felt too compelling for some to let go. The real strength of the hoax theory wasn't in the photos or the science. It was in how those doubts spread, feeding on mistrust, culture, and psychology. Some stories endure because the evidence is overwhelming. Others endure because the idea is irresistible. The moon hoax theory has survived more than half a century, not because the proof is strong, but because the story fits our fears and feeds our imagination. Too extraordinary to believe. In less than a decade, humanity leapt from short suborbital flights to walking on another world. For many, that speed was inspiring. For others, it was suspicious. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof, and for doubters, no amount of evidence ever feels like enough. An era of mistrust. The 1960s and 70s were soaked in secrecy and scandal. The Vietnam War eroded trust. The CIA was exposed for hidden programs. Watergate toppled a president. If leaders lied about war and politics, why wouldn't they lie about space? The psychology of conspiracy. Conspiracies offer a strange comfort. Believers feel they see what others miss, that they're awake while the rest of the world is fooled. A missing star becomes proof. A blurry shadow becomes a confession. Suspicion hardens into identity. Culture keeps it alive. In 1978, a Hollywood thriller called Capricorn 1 told the story of NASA faking a Mars landing on a movie set, complete with cameras, sets, and frightened astronauts. For many viewers, it looked eerily like what moon hoax believers had been describing for years. Later, jokes about Stanley Kubrick directing Apollo, and more recently, conspiracy videos online kept the theory alive. Even today, polls show millions still doubt humanity ever set foot on the moon. Belief thrives not because of evidence, but because doubt is contagious. But evidence matters. And when we turn to the hard proof, the hoax theory doesn't just weaken, it collapses. If the moon landings were real, there should be proof too solid to deny. Evidence that couldn't be faked in a studio or hidden for decades. And that's exactly what we have. The case for Apollo isn't fragile. It's overwhelming. Too many people to keep a secret. More than 400,000 engineers, scientists, and contractors worked on Apollo. A hoax that massive would have leaked long ago. Yet in over 50 years, no credible insider has ever produced evidence of fakery. That silence speaks volumes. The Soviets were watching Apollo unfolded at the height of the Cold War. The Soviet Union tracked every mission with radar and radio. If the United States had faked it, Moscow would have exposed the lie instantly. Instead, they congratulated NASA. America's greatest rival confirmed the landings happened. Moon rocks. that can't be faked. Apollo brought back 382 kilograms of lunar rock, samples that tell a story only the moon could write. They were billions of years older than Earth's youngest crust, filled with glass beads formed by micrometeorite impacts, and carried oxygen isotopes distinct from anything found on Earth. Scientists worldwide, even in countries hostile to the United States, verified them. You can fake a photo, you can't fake geology. Retroreflectors still working. Today, the Apollo crews left behind arrays of mirrors. To this day, scientists bounce lasers off them to measure the Earth-Moon distance with millimeter precision. Those mirrors are still there, still reflecting, still proving Apollo happened. Modern images of the landing sites. Orbiters from NASA, Japan, India, and China have photographed Apollo sites. They've captured descent stages, rover tracks, and even faint footprints. Different nations, different missions, the same evidence. A trail of data, too massive to fake. Telemetry, engineering notes, film reels, and even amateur radio recordings survive. A set can fake a shot. It cannot fake decades of hardware, data, and signals recorded worldwide. Put it all together. The workers, the rival tracking, the rocks, the mirrors, the images, the data, and the conclusion is unavoidable. The moon landings happened. For doubters, the problem isn't the lack of proof. It's that the proof is so overwhelming, they'd have to dismiss it all at once. And yet the hoax theory still refuses to die. Which raises a final question. Why do some myths outlive even the clearest facts? Before we move forward, if you've stayed with me this far, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest triumphs and its most persistent mysteries. And let me know in the comments, do you think the hoax theory damages Apollo's legacy or keeps it alive? Now, let's look at why this theory has survived for more than 50 years. Part of it is awe. Apollo was so extraordinary that some people simply can't believe it happened. To them, disbelief feels safer than wonder. Part of it is culture. In 1978, Capricorn 1 put the idea of a staged space mission on the big screen. Later, jokes about Stanley Kubrick directing Apollo turned into memes. Today, conspiracy videos rack up millions of views, giving the old doubts fresh life. And part of it is psychology. Doubt can be addictive. Believing in the hoax makes people feel sharper, more independent, like they see what others don't. In a strange way, that doubt has become part of Apollo's legacy. It ensures the story never fades, even when the evidence is clear. Conclusion. So where does the truth land? The problem was clear. Odd photos, rippling flags, and a culture of mistrust. The agitation grew as these details were stacked into a story of deception. But the solution has held for more than half a century. Overwhelming evidence, from moon rocks and Soviet tracking to lasers still bouncing off Apollo's mirrors on the lunar surface. The hoax theory is tempting. It thrills, it provokes. It makes us wonder if we've been fooled. But the reality is far greater. Because in July 1969, human beings, not actors, not props, truly stepped onto another world. They carried the hopes of millions and the courage to risk everything in the name of discovery. That step wasn't just an American victory. It was a human one. And maybe that's the irony. The doubt will never fully disappear. But every time someone asks, did we really go? The story is told again, and the evidence shines brighter. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
One giant leap for mankind. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like